According to two new polls in Israel, the majority of Israelis are unhappy with the regime's current economic policy in light of the ongoing pandemic. They want Netanyahu to resign as they blame him and his unity cabinet for the troubles that they suffer from. Simply put, they do not trust him. The new poll by the Central Bureau of Statistics Israel shows widespread financial and social suffering among the majority of the Israeli population. The report states that more than half of Israelis fear that they will not have enough for expenses such as food and utilities.
We need the government to provide us with a little bit of money so we can start the business again. And the government doesn't want to do that. This is why we are here today.
In fact, over 53% of Israelis, the poll says, do not trust the regime to protect them during the coronavirus crisis from the economic hardships. Another survey by the Channel 13 network suggests up to 85% of Israelis are unhappy with the regime's economic policy. The poll also says that 61% of Israelis disapprove of Netanyahu's overall handling of the COVID-19 crisis. Moreover, the poll revealed that Netanyahu's plummeting approval rating has harmed him politically, with his ruling right-wing Likud party projected to receive 33 of the 120 seats in the Knesset if elections were held today. This is 3 fewer than the 36 Likud received in March's general election. According to the poll by the Central Bureau of Statistics Israel, 21% of all Israelis suffer from depression. Also, the poll found that 55% of respondents said they did not have faith in the finance ministry to help the economic situation. The report also said that some 42% reported a growing feel of stress and dread. Also, there has been a 4.5% increase in suicides compared with last summer. Among those who commit suicide are many young people meant to be at the height of their career. It's no wonder these two surveys paint such a bleak picture in Israel. For the past several weeks, thousands of Israelis have taken to the streets to demand that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is facing several political crises, resign. The protesters blame Netanyahu for some or all of the problems manifesting under his watch. Not everyone is necessarily protesting for the same reason, but the majority is demanding his resignation. Following what some have described as a hasty reopening of Israel's economy in May, new daily infections in Israel have spiked to an average of 2,000 a day. Virus restrictions have battered the economy, with unemployment rising to nearly 20%. Protesters say financial assistance from the regime has been nowhere near adequate. Israel's economy is tanking, and about a quarter of the workforce is unemployed. Netanyahu's approval ratings are falling fast. He's also currently on trial for 3 corruption charges. Israel also had an unprecedented 3 legislative elections in just the past year, each one drawing an inconclusive result. A deal was finally reached after the March election to establish a coalition cabinet between Netanyahu's party and that of his political rival Benny Gantz. But the coalition has been criticized since the beginning as being too big and too expensive. Now, even that cabinet is at risk of collapsing, and if it does, it means yet another round of elections in Israel.
Economic situation here in Israel now it's very bad, but because we have the virus for sure, but the leadership, Prime Minister and Economy Minister have to handle this situation in order to solve the problem. But if they don't do it, if they behave like for themselves only and not for the citizen, not for the civilian, the situation is very bad. So they make it worse and worse instead of make it better. it makes it worse and worse. And the situation is very bad. Many unemployment people, more than 1 million unemployed people in Israel, they don't have money to buy food or medicine or to give them education to the children. And this is a very, very bad situation. Prime ministers that accused in felonies, in corruption, bribe and frauds, somebody who is accused in such things cannot be a bus driver, cannot be a nursery in the kindergarten. But prime minister? We don't want that our prime minister will be accused in felonies, especially in bribe. It's unbelievable. And you know, bribe, it means that if you take decision, the decision is influenced by the money that you get, not by the benefit of the citizen. This is the basic thing of bribe. This reason that we don't want that somebody who has these felonies will be prime minister in Israel.
On social media, Israelis have highlighted what they are facing. According to Mark, Israel needs much more than elections. Ongoing corona, failed economy, global travel isolation, mass poverty in the making, gang rape, failed leadership, no education, cyber attacks, and the law itself breaking the law. Travis asks, is Israel running out of multi-million-dollar missiles to shoot down children's balloons? Gil Huffman says that the blue and white calls Netanyahu's behavior spitting in the face of the citizens of Israel for personal reasons. News Israel 13 poll finds 50% say reason if there is an election is Bibi's legal problems, 18% good of Israel, 14% ideological reasons.
האמת שהרשויות או שהממשלה עצמה היא עשתה ממשלת חירום לקורונה, אבל תכלס במציאות זה היה ממשלה שהורכבה בשביל ג'ובים, כמו לשכת תעסוקה, כל אחד תפס לו שם איזה ג'וב, אפילו יש הרבה שרים שהם אין להם תיק, אין להם מה לעשות, אבל הם עולים לנו 45 מיליון. את מבינה? כמו הנגבי למשל. הם לא, זה שר חרטה, פשוט מאוד. אז בשבילנו, מה שהממשלה דאגה ממש בעקביות לעשות, היא ממש עקבית בלהפחיד, להפחיד את האנשים, להרתיע אותם, לעשות מהם במקום אזרחים נתינים.
ביבי נתניהו זה עבריין בתחפושת, פסיכופת. הבן אדם הזה יצר פה במדינה שלנו הפרד ומשול. שקרן, מכר את המדינה לטייקונים. הוא מתנהג בדיוק באותה תפיסת עולם כמו שמתנהגים בארצות הברית. בשביל זה הקווים שלו ושל טראמפ מגבילים. ביבי נתניהו הפך להיות האיום הממשי להמשך עתידה של ישראל. זה כבר לא עומד בשאלה אם נכון ימין או נכון שמאל. אין פה יותר דמוקרטיה. אני מזמינה אתכם ומבקשת מכם שתפנו אחרי זה את המצלמה לאחור.
יש הרבה כעסים, אני מתרשם שיש הרבה כעסים בציבור בכלל. המדיניות של נתניהו כשלה במובנים האלה. עובדה שהקורונה לאט לאט חודרת לאנשים להבין שכנראה שיש פה איזו קונספירציה כלל עולמית. ככה אני מבין את זה. העובדה היותר מצערת
This is one of the worst economic situations Israelis have found themselves in decades. You have such a number of unemployed people. You have merchants who are committing suicide. The markets are closed, but for some reason, IKEA had to be open and malls had to be open. The beaches had to be closed. This was a really horrible situation for so many people. They're in real despair, 25% unemployed, and a lot of violence within the family. So people they feel like they're absolutely desperate and they don't even know what to do, so they're going to the streets. And there's a big chance that the Israeli government will try to block such a possibility by doing another lockdown, or using this opportunity to impose draconian measures and silence free speech and arrest people very randomly and terrorize people so that they will not protest.
Police forces have been criticized after videos showing police using excessive force against protesters circulated on social media. At least 34 people were arrested after protesters demonstrated outside the Israeli parliament and Netanyahu's home. Police used water cannons to disperse the crowds. Even Guilhem Deltail of Radio France International was not safe from the police attacks. The journalist was attacked and injured by Israeli police. The New York Times reporter in Israel, Noga Tarnopolsky, was also beaten.
We came here to say enough for a prime minister that acts like a mafionaire, like a mob guy. With his criminal soldiers all around taking care of themselves and not taking care of anything else happening here. And all he cares about now is just staying out of jail.
Hundreds of protesters have been arrested from demonstrating. Netanyahu, for his part, accused Channel 12 and another private station, Channel 13, of delivering propaganda for the anarchist left-wing demonstrations by giving extensive coverage of the rallies. Thousands of Israelis have been protesting in Tel Aviv and elsewhere since mid-June, demanding Netanyahu's resignation over his alleged corruption and his regime's handling of the coronavirus pandemic and the current political crisis in Israel. However, with the protests escalating, it appears they have become a stage for violent clashes between supporters of Netanyahu and the protesters calling for him to step down. Protest organizers said in a statement that the violence was not a spontaneous event, but a planned ambush aimed at killing protesters. It seems that protesters that are protesting the current system in Israel are being attacked by supporters of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and they are not being held accountable.
It's young people, old people, retired people, sick people, healthy people, men, women, children, all over the country. Jewish, Arab, Druze, all the country. Does not matter if you are young or old, or if you have power or you have money. No. The aim is one, to explain Mr. Netanyahu, take yourself, your wife and your kid and go away. Go to Caesarea, go to the court, leave us. Let us live in a normal country, let us live in democracy, not a dictatorship country. We don't need it. The financial situation is in connecting with the economy situation. So Bibi, the prime minister who accused in felonies, I don't want to say Bibi. He is giving money, sometimes 350 each one, sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. There is no alliance, there is no this normal decision, and this money comes from loans. We have to bring to pay these loans. My son, my grandsons, and my grandsons has to pay this loan. So the financial situation is very bad. It's not. It will be influenced not ourselves, but only the third or fourth generation. We don't have money to give so much money to the population. No. No, the cabinet is not serving the people. The cabinet is not serving the situation. They don't understand the situation, or they understand, or they don't want to understand the situation. They behave like they want to serve only themselves. They behave like they want to serve only their own money, only their own ministers, but not the citizen. Not the simple citizens are coming every morning to work and to live a normal life, a normal country.
The concept of protesters being attacked was unacceptable online. Aaron says that there is an evasive plane and there are evasive protesters. The elusive protesters hurt the officer but are not seen on camera. Tomorrow, Bibi will give a speech on the Startup Nation. Yotam from Israel says his family have been protesting against the government for weeks. Not all Israelis are for Netanyahu. Peace be among us. Rabbi Danya says that the protests are big now. With police attacking them, lots of stuff that feels familiar to here. Elizabeth points out that the protesters are united in their opposition to Netanyahu, but otherwise driven by varying motivations: concerns re-corruption, economic suffering due to COVID lockdown, non-Zionism, opposition to the occupation, demands for racial justice for Ethiopian Israelis and Palestinians.
תראי, אין לי שום דבר נגד נתניהו, אני לא אוהבת ולא שונאת. אני רק חושבת שהבן אדם הזה היה יותר מדי בשלטון, בצורה כזו שהוא כבר לא תורם כלום למדינה, ונוצר מצב שהוא נמצא במלכוד, איך לעזור לעצמו מפני כל התיקים שלו וכל הנזקים שהוא עשה. והוא רואה במיוחד שעכשיו העם מתעורר, פתח את העיניים, הוא דורש את מה שמגיע לו, כי בסך הכל הם ניזונים מכל המיסים שלנו, אנחנו לא עובדים בשבילו, אלא הוא עובד בשבילנו, אבל המצב כרגע זה בדיוק ההפך.
נתניהו וכל משפחת נתניהו, שהשם שלהם האמיתי זה משפחת מיליקובסקי. הפרשה של הצוללות, ויש עוד פרשות אחרות שלא נחשפו, הם גנבו במשך שנים את המדינה, את הביטחון של המדינה, את הכספים של המדינה, הם גנבו פה את הפנסיות.
נפגעים העיקריים זה השכבות החלשות ביותר, שבלאו הכי שנים רבות הבעיות הכלכליות שלהם לא נפתרות, וכל גוף וכל ממשלה שהייתה קיימת למעלה מ-17 שנה לא טיפלה בהם כהוגן ברובד המוסרי. ולכן העוני קיים.
The only main thing that seems certain for now is that these emergency laws are being passed that are absolutely have not a very nice ring to them if you look at history, and they can be used for various purposes, and most of them not necessarily beneficial or benign. So what we have now is such a largely unemployed population, widespread poverty growing, many people who are ashamed to admit that they cannot continue on going on living in this manner, and the situation looks bleak. So what the government is probably going to do is more silencing of its citizens, more draconian laws, greater harsh penalties, and becoming more of a police state and less really providing money for people who need it and stimulus for small businesses and for individual private business people.
The level of distrust in the Prime Minister's handling of the coronavirus crisis is widespread. Only less than 30% of Israelis think the Prime Minister is handling the crisis properly. Netanyahu has rebuked the protesters, tweeting, "Don't drag the country towards anarchy, violence, and attacks against the police." Some believe Israel's longest-serving prime minister was distracted in recent months by plans to annex parts of the Israeli-occupied West Bank. Other demonstrators focus on a corruption case against him, saying Netanyahu was distracted by the start of his trial in May. He denies all wrongdoing. Behind Netanyahu's stumble is an inexorable spread of COVID-19. A Central Bureau of Statistics survey showed 55% of Israelis feared difficulty paying their bills, up from 46% during the lockdown. Critics say that the veteran Israeli leader appeared to lose interest in managing the crisis, failing to prepare a clear exit strategy after the first lockdown. As promised, financial aid is dogged by bureaucracy. Israelis will only continue to bear the brunt of what is being described as a politicized society, with everyone's fate in the hands of a very few elites, making the situation ever more complex for any solution. Here is the news making the headlines in Israel. The Times of Israel. Activists and officials want probe into excessive violence by police against protesters, calling for the downfall of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. A video in which a senior police officer appeared to assault at least 2 protesters during a demonstration drew swift condemnations from politicians and promises of an investigation, amid some of the most intense fighting between cops and activists in nearly 2 months of weekly rallies. Ynet News. Despite a few months since Israel opened back up its economy, number of job seekers continue to climb in August. Now, Israel's finance ministry warned in a report it will take Israel between 4 to 5 years to return to pre-COVID employment levels. There are 851,051 unemployed workers in Israel, out of which 536,906 have been forced to take unpaid leave due to the COVID-19 pandemic, according to data released by the Israeli Employment Service. The Jerusalem Post. Several Israeli Arabs, some of whom were born in Israel and are the children of military veterans, have lost their Israeli citizenship due to alleged registration errors. But according to some of those currently seeking remediation of the issue, Israel's Ministry of Interior and the Population and Immigration Authority revoked their citizenship on purpose. They claim that Israel is treating its Arab Bedouin residents as enemies rather than citizens with equal rights. I-24 News. Israel's Community Affairs Minister Tzachi Hanegbi claims Israel will need to reinvade the besieged Gaza Strip and take control of it once again. Israel unilaterally pulled out of the Gaza Strip in August 2005 after years of resistance against its occupation there by locals.